Hello everyone! In today's lesson, we're going to explore different ways to create successful narrative writing. This can be a good alternative to the conventional essay if you have a vivid imagination and a flair for creative writing. Now, keep in mind that the narrative essay is not the easy option. A story has to capture the reader's interest and appeal to their imagination from the very first sentence. So it needs to have a structure, and that starts with planning. So many people forget or they just skip this very important part of planning your story. If you think the story out as you go along without knowing how the plot is going to unfold, what will happen of the characters, what is the end of the story, you are likely to end up with a shapeless and a very poor narrative. So there are three important things to keep in mind when writing a narrative story. Number one, make sure that you stay relevant. Always look back at the essay title and focus on it. Your story should revolve around the title and not just fit it in loosely somewhere here or there. So keep the essay title up here at the forefront of your mind. Number two, sometimes the story is well thought out. You do have a plan, and that's good, but make sure that you keep track of time. If a story is developing effectively, you cannot simply wind it up in the last 5 minutes. A rushed ending can not only be disastrous in a story, but it will lose you a lot of marks. So make sure that you pace yourself well, give yourself time to write down what you had in mind, the plot that you had planned out at the beginning of the essay, and that you managed to do this within the time limit. So the time limit is very important. Relevance, number one, the time limit, number two. 3. If you're writing an adventure story with a lot of detail, but the structure is poor, the characters are not developed well, the ending is rushed, or perhaps even non-existent. If you find yourself out of time, sometimes essays don't even have a conclusion, that will score even fewer marks. Of course, with this being said, if you find that you have a good idea for a story when you read through the essay titles and you possess some flair for creative writing, then go for it. When it comes to narrative writing technique, there are no rules as such. A story can work brilliantly with or without dialogue, with the use of the first person, which means I, or we, which is the first person plural, or he, or they. It's up to you what you want to use and how you want your story to develop and the perspective that you're taking. But what is important is that you start your essay with an arresting start. And by arresting, I mean a captivating, an engaging, striking introduction. And this really applies to any type of narrative that you decide to go for. A very long introduction or a lengthy description of the characters in the story is generally a poor way to start. Make the opening attention-grabbing, which will keep the reader engaged, interested in the story. So you might be asking, but how do I create this arresting start? There are, of course, different ways how to go about it. Generally, if the story begins with an actual incident, then the reader is likely to feel involved from the very beginning. You can also start with dialogue, and the reader becomes immersed in the situation. Or you can open with an incident, some way into the actual story, and then through flashback, like a memory of the character that the character has, you explain how the situation came to be and who the characters are. I'm going to start out by reading an introduction for an essay title called A Horrifying Experience. It was dark in the woods. It wasn't anything like the dark that might lurk in someone's bedroom at night. This was the darkest place in which Matthew has ever been. There was not even a tiny glimmer of light. He was scared. Slowly, silently, he groped his way through the woods with his arms stretched out in front of him so the branches would not hit him in his face. Now, as you might have noticed, the introduction for this essay starts with the third person, he, and notice that we have introduced the character by his name, Matthew, at the very beginning. You might prefer to introduce your character later on in the story, or maybe not at all, that's up to you. And also notice the short and concise sentences. It was dark in the woods. There was not even a tiny glimmer of light. He was scared. Very short sentences, very simple sentences, but yet they managed to create an element of suspense. There is also, and you might have noticed this too, the play on the word dark. Not the dark that might lurk in someone's bedroom, but the darkest, that's the superlative form, the darkest place. And this intensifies even further the experience that the character is going through. And from the very beginning, we also have the setting. We know that the character, Matthew, is out in the woods at night. And also the use of the adverbs slowly, silently. Again, these help to create an element of mystery. And that's what you should be looking for, watching out for, when you're writing your own narrative stories. Now let's continue with the essay. Terror welled up inside him. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him until he came to a huge cabin. A gust of wind sent dead leaves all around him. He stopped, looked around him, and searched for the doorknob. He hesitated for a moment. He thought of his older brother, James, and thought what he would have done in this situation. He plucked up the courage and knocked on the door. When no one answered, he slowly and cautiously turned the handle, and the door creaked open. Now look at the expressions that we have used in this paragraph. Terror welled up inside him. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him. He plucked up the courage. A gust of wind sent what type of leaves? Dead leaves. These are expressions which you can learn and really you can adapt and use in different stories. Notice also the verbs used. Hesitated, creaked, the door creaked open. Adverbs like cautiously. Again, they all serve to successfully create this element of mystery. I'm going to read another introduction for the same essay title, A Horrifying Experience, and this takes quite a different approach. I couldn't breathe. Something was in my mouth. A rag. It tasted of dirt and oil, and something else that I could not place, like coconut nectar syrup. Someone was pressing the rag tighter and tighter, pressing against my neck until I felt like I was choking. Pure terror sucked the air from my lungs. I struggled to remain conscious. However, consciousness began to float away from me. Coldness crept into its place, numbing my mind, dulling my senses. Then, blackness swarmed me. Now, again, this introduction has very short, very concise sentences. As with the other introduction, it starts immediately with the incident. So the reader is put, perhaps not very willingly, directly in the incident. But now we want to know what has happened. We want to find out why the character is in the situation. It is also written in the first person singular, I, and this could be a good way to create more intimacy between the reader and the character, because we as readers feel like we're part of the story, like we can identify ourselves with the character. Also, a vocabulary term, a rag, is a piece of old cloth. Now, note the expressions used. Pure terror sucked the air from my lung. Blackness swamped me. I'm going to read out the paragraphs that follow this introduction that we've just read. So this is how it continues. I do not know what happened next. All I know is that when I woke up, I was greeted by hungry and vicious flames. I was too shocked to scream. My heart was beating fiercely against my ribs. What's happening? Why am I here? Now note the sense of realism. Like us, the readers, the character is puzzled. She, I know it's a she doesn't know what's happening. And this is effectively done through the use of rhetorical questions. What's happening? Why am I here? Remember, a rhetorical question is not meant to be answered as such, but as in this case, it is asked to create a dramatic effect. It also serves to create suspense. This is another technique which you can use in your narrative writing. I'm going to move on to the next paragraph. Then, suddenly, I saw a shriveled old man on the middle part of the stairs. His eyes were filled with rage. His clothes and face were drenched in blood, and in his right hand he held a blood-spattered chopper. Blood-spattered means covered with drops of blood. And it continues. I could not make sense of it all. Then I felt a massive pain coming from my feet. I gave an almighty scream, a terrible, fearful scream. I was sweating profusely when, to my horror, I saw the man approaching me. Now look at this turn of events. This is how it continues. Suddenly, I woke up from what seemed to be like a long dream. I was surrounded by the pale golden glow of the late afternoon, and I saw a crowd of people gathered, some of whom were crying, others sobbing. I caught a glimpse of my parents, who were standing behind an ancient cypress tree. I felt so light and weightless. I walked in an inconspicuous, which means very quietly, discreetly, manner towards my parents to see what was happening. As I reached them, I caught sight of what they were all looking at, and to my horror, I saw my grave. At that moment, I realized where I was, what had happened, and who I had become. How am I going to tell the rest of my family what has been the cause of my death? Who was that strange man in the cabin? How did I end up there? I am standing now in the middle of a white-walled room, which was once painted dirty pink, together with a young boy watching a Walt Disney movie. This was once my bedroom. My family had sold the house after I cannot help but cry and cry over my mother. They hear my cries every night. The boy is scared to sleep here in the night, but will they ever help me? I will not rest. Would you? This is something which you should manage to write in a time-constrained setting, meaning the examination. The story is developed sufficiently. The story is not very intricate, not very detailed. Things move on quite fast, yet the suspense is there, and it is created and maintained well with the use of expressions, short sentences, rhetorical questions, adjectives related to fear and anger and danger, and most importantly, everything is wrapped up neatly at the end. And this comes to a very important point. Make sure that you dedicate enough time to write a good conclusion for your essay. So we need an arresting start. Make it relevant, keep your writing relevant to the essay title. Make sure that you dedicate enough time so that you write down, you develop the plot that you had in mind and plan your work. And the final point, the conclusion. Make sure that you have time to write a good conclusion. It is better to cut off some detail and stuff that you are going to develop in your main writing, but you have time for the conclusion. Now, in all forms of writing, and particularly when it comes to narrative writing, it is vital to choose your words with care. This will help to make your story more captivating. You can use idioms and metaphors which will help make your writing more vivid and imaginative. However, it is always best to keep things simple and stick to what you feel you're comfortable with. So try to avoid using bombastic words or style that you feel might gain you marks when you're not really confident in it. Avoid experimenting with new styles during the examination. You should do that before the exam while you're still practicing and see yourself grow into a better writer, which you will, of course, over time. Don't feel obliged, however, to write in an over-dramatic way and maybe using words which you don't even know what they really mean. To help you build your vocabulary even further, we're going to look at some expressions that you can study and use and adapt to your own short stories or narrative writing. So we're going to look at some idioms and expressions related to danger, fear, bravery, fast movement, pain or injury, and finally excitement. We're starting with 8 expressions related to danger. Number 1, the image still haunts my dreams. This could be the opening sentence of your essay, and the word haunt shows that the writer is scared of this image, so it's not used in a positive sense. 2, the scene or the image was imprinted in my memory forever. Now, this can be a positive or a negative experience, we don't know, but the words imprinted means that it has left a mark on the writer. 3, danger seemed to lurk round every corner. Lurk means waiting. 4, there was utter confusion, and utter means a lot of. So it's a chaotic experience. There was utter confusion. 5, luckily, my guardian angel is used to working overtime by now. And this adds a bit of a humoristic tone to your writing. 6, I was thunderstruck. And this means I was astonished or amazed, extremely surprised. Shocked even. 7, adventure or trouble seems to follow me wherever I go. Or if you want to use the third person, adventure seems to follow him wherever he goes. And finally, to make a mountain out of a molehill. Now this means that someone makes too much of a minor issue. So for example, if you do badly or maybe you fail a test, it's not the end of the world, so you don't have to make a mountain out of a molehill. 8 expressions related to fear or nervousness. Number 1, sweating profusely, which means a great deal, a lot. 2, a cold sweat broke over me and I shivered uncontrollably. 3, a chill ran down my spine. 4, I was on tenterhooks, which means very worried, nervous. 5. My legs trembled like jelly. 6. I was frozen to the spot. 7. Sheer terror, blind panic. 8. Everything I did was all in vain, which means for nothing, useless, futile. These are 8 expressions related to bravery. Number 1. Hope had not died out completely yet. 2. I had a trick or two up my sleeve. 3. The thought lurked at the back of my mind. 4. I decided to run the risk. That's the first person. If you want to use the third person, the risk was worth taking. 5. I was determined to make the best I could of an unpleasant or a hopeless situation. 6. I plucked up courage, which means that although I was scared of something, I made myself brave enough to do something, to do it. I plucked up courage. 7. This was my last resort, which means my last option. I had no other options, and this was the last one. 8. While there is life, there is always hope. And I hope that you do believe in that. Now choose the expressions from this list that you like best and add your own and use them in your own writing. Okay, we're moving on to expressions related to fast movement. Gasping for breath, which means maybe you are running and you're out of breath and you try to breathe, you're gasping for breath. Spur of the moment decision, which means something was unplanned but you decided to do it here and there at the spur of the moment decision. However fast I ran, I just couldn't seem to get away. He vanished into thin air. Or you can say he disappeared or it disappeared into thin air. It materialized right in front of my eyes. Or it appeared right in front of my eyes. To turn a deaf ear upon someone or something. So if you turn a deaf ear, you're not going to take note of it or of him or her. To run out of luck. Or another way to say it, my luck touched rock bottom. On a positive note, you can say I thanked my lucky stars. Or I must have been born under a lucky star. 8 expressions related to pain or injury. Excruciating pain. Now, excruciating is an extreme adjective, which means it was something or something is intensely painful, very painful. 2. My ribs felt as if they had been crushed. 3. He was in agony, which means a lot of pain. 4. I staggered to my feet, only to fall back in pain. To stagger to your feet means to stand up. 5. And I hate these. A splitting headache. When you have a very bad headache, a splitting headache. 6. A dull ache started at the back of my head. You know, when that splitting headache is about to come, first you start with the dull ache at the back of your head. 7. And the pain was unbearable, which means it was awful, almost intolerable. And the last, she bent over in agony as the pain hit full force. And we're going to finish off with 8 expressions related to excitement. Number 1. She felt on top of the world, or she was on top of the world. She passed her history test and she was on top of the world, which means she was very happy. We can also say to be over the moon or in 7th heaven. These are expressions which you should learn, and they can or are likely to come out in the language component of the examination. You have an exercise which is dedicated to idiomatic expressions. 3. It was the experience of a lifetime. So it was a very good experience. 4. If someone is having a whale of a time, it means that they are enjoying themselves very much. So the idiom is a whale of a time. 5. Something is sheer excitement or pleasure, it means it's very, very enjoyable. 6. Another extreme adjective, ecstatic. I was ecstatic, which means I was elated, delighted, extremely happy, overjoyed. 7. I wished time would stop just then. Or you can say time just flew by, which means that you were enjoying yourself and you didn't keep track of time. And the last one, I felt as if I could forget almost everything that had happened and live just for that moment. So these are some expressions that I advise you to learn and study and try to use them in your own writing. You can really study these and use them for different stories that you will be writing. Okay, so let's recap. What are 6 main points that you will take away from this lesson? Number 1, plan your essay. 2, keep it relevant. Always look back at the essay title, focus on the essay, keep it up here at the forefront of your mind, and make sure that you're not going out of point. 3, of course, depending on your style, but if you use short, concise sentences, usually they serve to create a dramatic effect and the meaning stays clear. Sometimes the meaning of sentences is obscured, it's not clear, it's unambiguous. Why? Because of complex sentences and bombastic words that end up distracting the reader. 4. Keep track of time. And while you're at it, make sure that you have enough time to write a good conclusion for your essay. So while you are planning and you're writing down the plot of your story, make sure that you have enough time to actually write it down during the examination and leaving a lot of time for the conclusion to wrap it all up. 5, you can use techniques like rhetorical questions, dialogue, play around with the use of the first person I or the third person he. Remember the I, the first person, creates a more intimate feeling. We feel like we're part of the story. The third person he makes the writing more objective, like we are outsiders and we're looking at what's happening. Both are fine. It depends on the style that you prefer, on the story and your plot, how you're evolving the story. So play around with these techniques. And finally, study a lot of expressions, a lot of vocabulary that you can find useful in your essays and practice. Read, take ideas from your favorite authors, look at the style, how they write, how they develop their writing, and have fun with it. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope that you have enjoyed it and you have taken something from what we have discussed. Do practice a lot, read a lot, write a lot if you enjoy it, of course. And writing is all about the journey. Okay, so take care, good luck, and I will see you soon.